Hi, I'm Allie Hamilton, and I'm so happy to welcome you to the Come As You Are podcast. Every week, we'll be talking about some aspect of healing, usually around childhood wounds and complicated familial relationships. The topics will always coincide with my personal essay of the week, and this will be a place where we can take a deep dive together. I'm so thrilled you've joined me and delighted for you to always come as you are. Hi there. Hi there. Welcome to our talk. Today, the topic is you should smile more. You should smile more, which is a comment that every woman has heard at some point in her life while walking down the street. Every girl, every woman in your life, I would venture to guess, has heard someone say that to her, a stranger. You should smile more. You should smile. Hey, baby, why aren't you smiling? You'd be so much prettier if you smiled, that that kind of thing. And of course, it was on my mind because last week, Caitlin Collins was in the Oval Office with our president, asking about the Epstein files, and in particular, asking about the latest drop of files, another 3 million, files, and the way that that was handled, because there are a whole lot of victims whose names were not redacted. There are photographs of children in a state of undress that were not redacted. And yet all the men, except for like Epstein and a few other people, those were redacted. So she was asking him, what do you have to say to the survivors who are feeling really violated yet again, because of the way this was mishandled? The DOJ mishandled the latest drop of files, and he got angry. And instead of answering the question or extending any kind of compassion for the survivors who have been, trying to get any kind of justice for years now, he attacked Caitlin Collins and said, I've known you for 10 years. And then he starts talking to the whole room about her as if, he's going to shame her now. And he says, she's a young woman and she never smiles. And you're a terrible reporter and you should smile more. And you know why you don't smile? It's because you're not telling the truth and you know it. And she said to him, I'm asking you about the Epstein survivors. It's not a happy conversation. Are you going to, and he continued to personally attack her and tell her she should smile more. I must say, I keep thinking there's nothing that, can happen at this point that will shock me. And I continue to be wrong. I happened to be watching that interaction in real time, and my mouth fell open because it is it's just right out of the Predator handbook, that line, you should smile more. It's literally like a thing that kind of man will say to you on the street. I just could not believe this is what he's saying, sitting, at the Resolute desk in the Oval Office to a reporter, a seasoned, well-respected reporter. It's just so despicable. And then, of course, the vice president starts talking to Megyn Kelly about it and doubles down and says, oh, president's so perceptive, he's such a perceptive guy. Like he was talking to Caitlin Collins about, how she should we don't have to be so serious all the time. Yeah, we don't need to be serious about child rape and pedophiles, right? And Megyn Kelly's like, it's so funny because I said that about Caitlin Collins a year ago. And, Roger Ailes, by the way, Megyn Kelly sued Roger Ailes for sexual harassment. I don't even know what to say anymore, really. So that's why that phrase was on my mind. You should smile more. And I started by writing about this thing that happened when my daughter was 7. And I was walking with her and one of her little friends. We were going to a playground that's near our house. And I had, the bag of stuff when you're a mom, like a blanket, and I had sunscreen, and I had a book in case the girls were, happily playing. Maybe I would get to read, but I always had a book with me that I never got to read in those days. And I had Band-Aids and alcohol wipes and snacks and water and just all the things that you have when you are the mother of children. And were walking, and the girls were skipping ahead, holding hands. They would get like 20 feet ahead, and they knew to stop at the corners and wait for me to catch up. And sometimes they would like run back to me, and my daughter would tell me something, they were having a really animated conversation and laughing, and just that sweet, 7-year-old, like tooth fairy, unicorns, like draw pictures and there's rainbows everywhere, just like 7. In case you've forgotten what 7 is, right? Incredibly sweet. So we get down to Main Street and we turn the corner, and like City Hall is going to be up on our right, and the playground, we're going to have to cross the street. It's on the other side. And as we turn the corner, the girls are, again, they're like 15 feet ahead of me. And at the crosswalk, I see 2 men. Now, I grew up in New York City, and I'm always scanning the environment. When I'm walking, I'm always aware of my environment. And so I noticed them. But I don't assume when I see men on the street that there's a problem. That's not my worldview. So I just was aware. And then as the girls were getting closer, I noticed the men notice the girls. And then I saw them look around to see, who are these girls with? And I started to pick up my pace a little. And I saw them, say something to each other and laugh. And then I'm looking at the girls, and the girls are not skipping now, but they're very caught up in their own conversation. They're, animated, gesturing, laughing, whatever, and not aware of these men. As, they're 7. They don't need to be, right? But I see one of the men start walking toward them, and he says something. And I see my daughter and her friend come to a stop. And then I watch my daughter, like it was like slow motion. I watched her head turn around looking for me. And I was like running toward them before I even knew that I was running, and yelling, "Hey," I'm going to drop some F-bombs right now. "Hey, get the fuck away from them," like loud. And, the man that was talking to them immediately like realizes I'm with them. I immediately get in front of them. I stop in front of them. And I'm, of course, like, my heart's pounding. I just ran. I took off sprinting. And I put my arm up in front of the girls. The other man had come. He starts walking over as well. So he's like a few feet away. And they're both like sauntering, laughing, whatever. And the guy that had been talking to the girls, he like looks me up and down, and he's like, "You are fine. Like, you should smile more." And I was so enraged. I felt like I could have just, I felt like I could have taken them both, like right there in front of City Hall. I felt like I could have just taken, I was so angry. And I had my arm up the way my grandmother used to have her arm up when I would ride in the bucket seat of her car when I was little, I was like 3. And she'd have to stop short. The arm would come out, like as if, her arm would save me from death. And I felt in that moment like my arm actually might be able to save them. I was so angry. And I said to both of them really, but to the man that was just like, he was just so not bothered by me at all, I said to him, these girls are 7. They're 7. You are sick. And, I said some other choice words too. And I dropped another F-bomb. And my daughter, I heard her kind of like squeak behind me, like a little, like a kind of like a laugh, like she was a little bit shocked. I mean, there were, no one used the F word in the house. And so for me to be doing that twice, I think she was like shocked and also like impressed because I was so angry. And then I took the girls by the hands and I, turned around and walked them across the street and to the playground. But they were staring at me like, I had sprouted wings, and I was saying in the essay, like, I wish that I had wings, that I could have like picked them up and flown them somewhere safe. But there isn't anywhere safe in this world for children. And I genuinely feel that way. You may be able to keep your children safe for some amount of time if you are able to work out your life so that you can be with them. But I'm going to share a whole bunch of things that happened to me as a kid. I think that I do think some of it has to do with access. And I used to think, because I grew up in New York City, that is why so many things happened along the way. And I think that is some of it. I think I was a latchkey kid. All of us in the 70s and 80s, we were moving around the city by ourselves from a really early age. I was packing my own lunch, for 3rd grade. I was taking the public bus when I was 8. And I was not unique in that. Like all of my friends, we were, most of us, doing that. Some people had moms they would be walking to school and their moms would be walking behind them. I did not have that. My mom worked. My parents were divorced, and I didn't have that. So, I think that is some of why I had so many different experiences that were not good. And I think if you are lucky enough to be able to make sure that you are with your kids, like I've been able to organize my life. When my kids were little, I worked, but I was able to set my schedule so that I could be with them. I was with them until they went to preschool. Then I was able to pick them up. I was able to arrange my schedule so that I could be with them. And I feel very fortunate about that. That I was able to like have a full-time gig, but also be able to be with my kids. And not everybody is able to do that, So, and it is really sad to live in a world where you can't feel like your kids are safe if they're taking public transportation or, walking from one place to another. It just isn't the way it should be. And it is, I think, for anyone who has had experiences, anything to, and I'm going to give you all the trigger warnings because I'm going to be talking about assault. I'm going to be talking about things that are certainly not things that kids need to be hearing. So if you have, this is not an episode to be listening to with little ears. But also for you, if you don't feel particularly like resourced right now, if you are someone who has been through that, if you're a survivor and you're not in a place where this is, the kind of conversation you are able to have right now, it doesn't have to be the time for this. But I am going to be talking about some of these things because I think that there are a lot of men who really don't understand what it is like to grow up as a girl in this culture, to walk around the world in a girl's body, and a woman. I genuinely, and I don't think it's possible for a man to understand in a visceral way what it's like. These are the waters that we are swimming in. And so I think that unless you have actually been swimming in those waters as a girl or a woman, you just don't, I can't know what it's like to be in a man's body, be in a boy's body. I don't know. I only know what my own experience has been. And it's not to say a lot, boys get abused. Children are not safe in this world. So, which breaks my heart. And the more that I've written about this, that's why I used to think it was like, oh, well, it could, because I grew up in New York City, but it's not that. Every time I write a piece like this, I hear from women from all over the world, and they're like, me too. Like, me too, me too, me too. So it's not just because I grew up in New York City. As these files, as more information came out, and, it is by design that there are verified, they mixed everything in. It's like all mixed in, allegations, and then verified, testimony from actual like depositions. It's all mixed in. It's not, it's intentional. It's meant to be so overwhelming, so much information. How can you possibly, go through it all? You're hearing all these things. Just the most vile, dark, doesn't even sound like it could be possible, right? It's so awful that you're like, this sounds like the most horrifying, evil, if somebody sat down to write the most depraved like screenplay or novel or whatever, this is what we're, so it's, and that's all mixed. You're like, it hurts to contemplate that these poor kids went through this kind of torture and pain and have not had any justice. Like, it's so painful. And the number of people it has taken to allow this to go on, that's also part of it, And you don't get that unless you are in a culture that tells you men are intrinsically more valuable than women. Boys are more valuable than girls intrinsically. It's just, this is like when you are in a patriarchal society, this is the only context where this can happen. Full stop. So, some of what happens is that when you are a little girl and you're moving around the world, like, so I'm going to start talking about some things now. When I was 8 years old, I was in Central Park with my third grade class. It was our art class. We had gone to the park. We were going to sketch trees. We were supposed to, go find a tree and something that looked pretty to us and then sketch it. We had our colored pencils. My best friend and I, we took off, we found a tree, we sat down, we were, there with our pencils and our sketchbooks, and we're sketching this tree. and looking down, sketching, looking up, looking down, looking up. And like, I don't know, fifth time we look up, there's a man standing there with his pants down. He's got his penis out. He's totally erect and he's masturbating. Two 8-year-old girls. And we, we're little girls, right? We look at him. We're like shocked, scared, jump up, grab our stuff, start screaming for our teacher and, go running. And he's laughing maniacally as we're like running away. I remember that she yelled for everybody to come. All the kids came and we went back to school. I do not know if they called our parents. What I do know is that no conversation happened about it. It's just this thing happened and that was it. It was just kind of left out there. The next time I saw a penis, I was on a public bus. I was 10. I was heading toward 5th grade. And I was sitting, I'd gotten a seat. I was sitting and I made eye contact with this man who was staring at me across the way. He was also seated. And he looked at me and then he looked down in his lap meaningfully, like we were kind of sharing a secret, like he was going to show me something. So I looked down and he had his penis in his hand. I didn't even know what I was looking at first. And then I did understand what I was looking at. And then I was devastated. I looked away. I was horribly embarrassed and confused and scared. And I just did not understand why he did that. And I still don't. I still don't understand why anyone would get off, any man would get off on showing a little girl his erection. Like that's sick, you're not well. The first time a man grabbed me, I was 13 and I was heading to my ballet class. My hair was in a bun. 13, in case you don't, remember 13, I had braces. My favorite color was purple. I would draw horses in the margins of my notebooks. You're a kid. You're a child. You're a kid, I went into the building of the ballet studio and there was this stairwell, very narrow, steep stairwell. And this man was walking toward me as I started veering toward the building and he went in ahead of me. He actually opened the door and I went in and I had a, no. He saw me. I started walking toward the building. He opened the door and went in. He did not hold the door open. He opened the door, went in ahead of me. And then I went in. And then as I was going up the stairs, he was walking very slowly. And I had this feeling of wanting to just get past him. And so I ran past him. And as I went past him, he grabbed me from behind. And he put one hand over my mouth and another hand between my legs. And he was shoving his hips into me, started adjusting his, hips like into the back of, into my hips and said to me, just don't move. Okay. And I had been in like flight, fight, freeze. I was in freeze. I just was so shocked and scared. And when he said, just don't move, okay, I think it was the question that got the wheels of my other brain spinning. I wasn't in my animal brain anymore. There were like options, and I bit his hand and I elbowed him as hard as I could in the ribs. And he let go of me, and I turned around. So I was facing him, and I started to crab walk backward up the stairs, and I was sobbing. And he looked scared. It was weird. Like he looked scared. I am sure that men who are attracted to children, a certain kind of man, at least, he probably realizes that they're very ill. Not all men, but I'm sure there are some men who understand if they want to hurt children or be with children, like they're not okay. And maybe he was one of those people because he looked scared, or maybe he was just scared that he was about to be caught. I don't know. But he looked scared, and then he turned around and he ran down the stairs and out the door. And I raced as soon as I waited to watch the door close and make sure he was gone. And then I turned around and ran up the stairs and burst into the ballet studio, into the office. I couldn't even speak. I just said a man, and I pointed, and they knew right away. And two of the dancers in the company went running down the stairs, two men, but it was too late. He was gone. And one of the female dancers in the company came, and she put her arm around me, whatever. And they called my mom and told her what had happened. And my mom did not come to the studio. My mom's house was 2 blocks away. I don't remember what she said. My brother was, at the time, he would have been, about 2, but almost 3, so I don't know if she said that he was napping. I don't know what she said. All I know is she didn't come. And they were asking me, do you want one of us to walk you home? Do you want to stay and take class? I was shaking, just shaking. And I decided to stay and take class because I knew if I went home, my mom was not the kind of person to talk about this stuff. I think that she felt rage about it. I do. But I think she also felt like there was nothing she could do about it. These were things that were going to happen. And it was almost like throwing me to the wolves. Like, you're going to have to learn how to handle this, learn how to deal with it. She just wasn't someone to really talk about the hard things or the painful things. That's why she drank. She would blur the edges of things that were difficult. And so I knew if I went home, I wasn't going to get like a hug or like, comfort. That wasn't going to happen. So I stayed, I took class. One of the dancers walked me home. And sure enough, when I went in, I think she said to me, are you all right? And I am pretty sure I just said, yes, and went into my room. There were a lot of I didn't write about this, but when I was 14, it was tough. My mom, when I was, that year, the year that I was 13, I had asked her to get me a bra and she wouldn't. And my stepmom ended up getting me a bra. And then my mother got furious with my stepmother. When I was 14, I was walking down the street with my mom, and I was wearing this Betsy Johnson dress, and it had a built-in bra. And this man walked by us, and he made some comment, and my mother turned to me and she said, you have to wear a bra. When you don't wear a bra, your tits bounce and it makes men hard. And she looked very angry. And I thought she was angry with me. That's how it seemed. And that may very well be how it was. I was wearing a built-in bra, like the dress had, and I said that to her. And I got very emotional, and she said to me, do not cry. It's just like, so there was nowhere to put any of the feelings about any of it. and the messages were really confusing. It's like, you can't have a bra. And, and then it's like, it's your fault if like, someone, I mean, it was not, it was very confusing and difficult to try to figure out what, like, no one does anything. That's another part of this too. When you are a girl and you are walking around in the world and things happen, for example, in the city, I would walk everywhere, and I would walk across the park. I would walk to school, whatever. And you walk by a construction site, you're 14, maybe you're 13, you're 14, whatever. 20 guys start yelling the most graphic, sexual stuff, and no one does anything. No one defends you. No one says, hey, are you okay? Sometimes people look at you a little bit like it's your fault, a little judgy. But the message is, this is normal. No one's going to do anything. If no one does anything or says anything or offers any kind of help or yells back at these guys, the message is, this is the tax you pay in this world for existing as a girl, as a woman, because it doesn't stop. It continues. It's like, this is the tax that you pay. And then there's also, I've been talking about strangers so far. Then there's also like the people who are not strangers. There are your mother's best friend's husbands who show up at your house at weird times when you're there by yourself, and they say they're looking for your mom. And they kind of like hover around the front door. This happened when I was like 12. One of my mother's best friend's husband showed up, and I said, oh, my mom's not here. Do you want to like leave a message or something? And he was like, oh, no, that's okay. Whatever. And how are you? And then he's like, you're so beautiful. You're so beautiful. You're growing into such a beautiful young lady. And then and I was feeling super uncomfortable. And this was someone who was at our house all the time, like family that I had known from the time I was 8. And he leaned in and kissed me on the mouth. I was 12 years old. You don't know what to do with you don't know what to do. You're like, it doesn't, a man followed me into the elevator when I was 12 with my little brother, who was, a toddler, and my best friend and one of my brother's little friends. And this man followed us into the elevator and exposed himself. Like, these things happen all the time. I mean, and I'm not even sharing all the things. Like, do you remember like walking down the street when I was 15 and I got to the corner, I was going to cross the street, and this man drove by slowly in his car, and he's like had his dick out, It's like, if you just look down at the wrong time, you're getting an eyeful of, penis that you didn't ask to see. It's nonstop. I mean, I want you just to think for a minute. In a million years, if you could imagine, a woman just like whipping out her vagina, like on a public bus, I mean, maybe if she's really not well, like if she's really not okay, maybe. But otherwise, no, not. And this is like a thing that's happening all the time. I want you to understand. It's not normal, and it's not okay. And it doesn't happen in reverse because we don't think about boys and men as expendable, as playthings. We don't center women and make it like, well, women can just do whatever they want and take whatever they want. That's not the culture. But it is in reverse. And it is a constant thing. It's all the time. I would go to Central Park and try to like, in New York City, that's your beach, when it gets warm. You take a blanket, you go with your friends, you go with your girlfriends, you go to the beach, you do a little picnic, whatever. Maybe you want to like Try to sunbathe? No, that's not going to happen because some guy is going to come and sit down like 10 feet away, 8 feet away, and whip out his penis at some point. You just don't get a break. It just doesn't end. And then there's, like I was saying, the friends of your parents, teachers at school, male teachers at school, doing things and saying things they shouldn't be doing or saying. There's just no place where you can relax and feel safe. And you get used to it because there's no recourse. There's no, no one's going to do anything for you. No one's going to make that better or change that for you. No one's standing up for you. No one's even saying to you, yeah, no, this is terrible. It's not okay. No one's doing any of that. It's just like, this is how it is. So you have to figure out how to like integrate that and carry on with your life. And then there's the other stuff, there's the people, just the different rules when you go to school as a girl. You see, okay, there are different rules for girls and boys. Boys are allowed to be rambunctious. They're allowed to take up space. They're allowed to move around, and girls are not. And I think some of that has changed, but not as much as you think. And I know that because I volunteered in both my kids' classrooms when they were growing up. It's not as much as you think, So I was writing about that. And then, of course, I was writing about a lot of these men who've shown up in the files, like Deepak Chopra, for example. And am I surprised? No, I'm really not. There are a lot of people in the wellness world, men, who take advantage of that sort of like expert role. And I was writing about that, and he's one of them. I have a really, it bothers me even more, and bothers is not the right word. It infuriates me even more when people in the quote unquote wellness world do this kind of thing, grift, take advantage, manipulate, because you do have people who are coming to you for help, vulnerable people who are looking for healing, and to prey on people like that is so despicable. And when you talk about someone like a Deepak Chopra or Bikram, and so many others, like so many of these wellness bros, it's such a big grift. It is, it's just really, I was talking about like Deepak, he would talk about like the divine feminine a lot, there are so many straight male, quote unquote, spiritual teachers teaching things like the divine feminine. And I really have to say to women out there, if you want to learn about the divine feminine, like at this point, really, first of all, at any point, study with a woman. Like, what are you doing? Why would you go to a man to study about the divine feminine? I mean, just ask yourself that question. Like, what is happening that you think the expert on the divine feminine is going to be a man? It's not. It's not going to be. Men are going to they're going to write from that perspective. They're going to think from that perspective. It's just, that's normal. It's what we all do. Just like women are going to write from are there female writers who can write men well? Yes. And are there male writers who can write? Yes. Not a ton of them, but there are a few. But everybody's moving through the world from their own perspective. So like, if you want to study something about the divine feminine, I would say for sure, go find, there's so many brilliant women teaching that. Because what happens when you start, centering men around a topic like that, what you're running the risk of is learning that, okay, well, the divine feminine is all about softening. It's about, you have the, you know, the masculine and the feminine, and there's a balance, and you're in the you have to soften and open and nurture and give over. And if you start to feel a little uncomfortable, or you're questioning, or you're feeling some anger come up because maybe you've been living in this world your whole life and you're like, wait a second, haven't I been like softening and giving over and like already doing all this stuff to support the constructs that support men like my whole life already? Like, you want me to soften more, give over more? If you start to question or feel some feelings around that, you will be told that that's just your resistance. It's your resistance, and you have an opportunity to soften more. Okay, please. LOL. Like, please. You know, there are a lot of male spiritual teachers, and I put that in serious air quotes, who will teach you that if you are struggling with this idea, it's like a hole in your spiritual practice, and it's an opportunity, you know, to like, to give more. We're giving like too much already, you know, it's enough. Like, that's not the divine feminine. And that's not a spiritual practice either. A spiritual practice is meeting the moment, right? It's, facing reality as it is, which is not always as, you know, we want it to be. But discernment, just being able to take a look around and see, okay, this is what's happening right now. Which is why in this moment in time, anyone in that in the like the spiritual community or the wellness world, any yoga, anyone who's not speaking up right now and talking about what is happening in this country, in the world, like, no. Because spirituality, like a worthwhile spiritual practice, is certainly about the inner work, figuring out like what scares me, what stops me, what's driving me. You know, what are my patterns? Do I have patterns that are like not serving me? You know, is there like a new groove that I might want to like try to explore here? All those things are really important. Self-study, you know, understanding yourself, absolutely important. So you can be accountable for the energy that you're spreading, and so that you can live life in a way that feels good. So you can find some ease and some peace. It's not, to me, it's not like happiness, you know, it's peace, right? It's ease. It's like, I understand myself. I know what my strengths are. I know what makes me feel fulfilled. And I know how I can be useful, you know? It's a balance of like that inner work that you're doing so that you can then try to help make the world around you a more peaceful, loving place, you know? And so anyone who's teaching a spiritual practice at this moment in time and not talking about what is happening to people in the streets of our country, immigrants, our immigrant population, the way people are being murdered in the streets, the way people are being denied due process, the way children are being thrown into detention centers. If you're not talking about that stuff right now, I'm not sure what's going on, because it's not about being political. I don't want to be political. Everything's political. The way the food gets to your plate is political. If you don't want to talk about this stuff, you should really not be teaching an ethical practice. You should find something else to do, honestly. You know, and that's okay. Not everybody has to want to do that. I'm just saying, if you're going to do it, then you need to be ready to have really uncomfortable conversations and work hard. And if you screw up, and you're allowed to screw up, you know, nobody's like, none of these people that I was writing about, like Deepak Chopra, like John Friend, Bikram, like no teacher has to be, I don't put anyone on a pedestal. I, you know, long ago realized that's not a thing that you're going to want to do. I do expect anyone who's going to call themselves a spiritual teacher or guide, who's going to charge money for healing, for trauma work, I do expect that kind of person to be working harder than anyone else in the room on their ethics, on, being who they say they are, doing what they say they're going to do, and when they mess up, being able to give a full-throated apology. And if you can't do those things, you should not be teaching and selling and preaching and, like that's it. And to be exchanging emails with a known pedophile, no, sir. No, sir. And those kind of emails where you're like making disgusting, inappropriate comments about young girls, no, it's not okay. Absolutely zero, not okay. We're done. There's no coming back from that. Anyone who's in these files, kissing up to this guy, talking to him, knowing who he was, we're done. It's unacceptable and not okay. And I don't care if you're teaching at Harvard, you're teaching at UCLA, I don't care who you are, what kind of doctor you are, if that's what you're doing, you know who this person is and you're exchanging emails and more. No. It's just a loud, hard no. It's yeah. And it's I think part of what is so difficult is there are a lot of women who will go and study with men like this. And you do start to it's heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking to watch because it's like, what's going on there? Is it that you are feeling like someone named, Bikram, he has left the country. There is a $7 million judgment against him for, sexual harassment. There are 6 different, rape cases against him, and he has fled the country to avoid paying the $7 million that he owes, this woman who worked for him that he was harassing. And how many women have to come forward and say, this man assaulted me, this man raped me, before you believe them? How many women does it take? I'm just wondering. Because, with the president of the United States, we have 28 women. That's not enough. That's not enough women. We have 1,000 women in the Epstein case. And you won't believe them. You need this guy's emails, the dead guy's emails, in order to believe 1,000 women who are standing up and saying, this happened to me. It's just, for someone like me who's been through so many things, it's devastating. And, all survivors, all of us, and you're talking about 1 in 4. Sometimes it's 1 in 3 is the rate that they think, the number of women who have been assaulted in this country. Every survivor right now, and every kid who is, old enough to be on the internet is watching what people are saying in the comments. And you're not, I'm not going to forget. I know the people who are speaking out in my life and the people who are totally quiet. I don't want to be political. I don't like to be political. When you say you don't want to be political, I just need everybody to understand every freedom that you enjoy because someone got political on your behalf. It might be your grandma, but somebody who came before you got political, and that's why you get to vote or go to school if you're a woman or have your own credit card or your own bank account because someone cared for you to have rights. So when you say, I don't want to be political, really that is the most privileged, ungrateful, unaware stance. And it's just like, I don't care about anybody but me. And, the rest of you can try to like work it out, I guess. But also you're so annoying. Like, can't you just stop? I don't want to be political. Meanwhile, we're out here, trying to make sure people don't die in the streets. It's really painful to watch. And, I was just a few years ago, my daughter, she was 14 at the time, a couple of years ago, she was on the street and she started getting harassed by this man. I didn't write about this in the essay either, but it was the first time that had happened. It's like, when your kids get to be a certain age, they don't want you to be like around all the time. They would like to have some autonomy, and that is how it should be. And I had, talked to her because you have to talk to your daughters in this world. Just like you have to talk to your sons. You have to talk to your sons about consent. You have to get over your own discomfort and have conversations with your children so they understand what is okay and what is not okay. And so I have done all of that, and it's not easy and it's not comfortable, and that's okay. You can be uncomfortable and still do something. And so she was alone, and this man started harassing her on the street, and he got her up against a street lamp. He was, it was more that he was not sexual in nature. He was scaring her. He was, aggressive. And so she had backed up and she was up against a street lamp, and he was, yelling at her and coming at her. And she told me there were 4 men who looked like they had just come from the gym, standing 10 feet away, watching this happen. Not one of them came over to stop this from happening, let alone the 4 of them together. They just watched. And it just so happened, like, luckily, a guidance counselor from her school, this woman was driving by and pulled her car over. She was in the car with her daughter. She rolled down her window and said, "Do you feel safe right now?" And my daughter said, "No." And she said, "Get in." And she drove my daughter away. What is happening? Like, what is going on in that moment? What are these men doing? I really do want to understand. 4 men go to the gym to get strong, but they're going to watch a 14-year-old girl get harassed on the street by a man and just stand there and watch and not help? I don't understand. Really, I don't. I don't get it. There's 4 of you. So what is the point? What are you getting strong for? To get laid? Like, is that it? That's all you care about? You don't care about this little girl standing there? Like, I that's not strength. Like, what is that? I really don't, I don't get it. I don't understand. I'd like to think that when my kids are out in the world, if I'm not there, there's going to be some adult to step in if something happens. Because I promise you, if I were out in the world and I saw something that wasn't okay happening to a kid or anyone else, I would step in. That is what people are doing right now when they're filming. They're trying to help strangers be okay. We need the world to be like that. That's what people are missing. You know, if you haven't made any phone calls to your representatives at this point, please do that. Fivecalls.org. Please. It takes 4 minutes of your time to call your representatives and say anything. Anything. Please don't fund anymore. No more funding for DHS until we get, some kind of handle on this. We can't abolish ICE right now. Look, of course I would love to do that. This organization, this is not okay. What's going on right now? Absolutely not okay. It's just excessive force and a violation of people's due process and the Fourth Amendment, the Eighth Amendment, the 14th Amendment, the First Amendment, this is not okay what's going on. They're yanking people out of their cars, their racial profile. I mean, it's not okay. But we're not going to be able to abolish. And they've got a $75 billion slush fund. So we're not going to be able to get rid of them, but we don't need to be funding more. And there are at least some things that we could try to get, which, I know there's a lot of people who are like, well, they're not going to follow that anyway. That's okay. They may not. They may keep masks on, or they may show up at schools anyway. It's like we're trying to get some things on the books, because what is happening and what does work is the legal system still works sometimes. Not in every case, but in many of them. The ACLU wins a lot of cases against this administration. So it does matter to get some things down, like a code of conduct, like you can't wear masks, or you have to have a judicial warrant, or you can't be at a school or a hospital or a place of worship. All of these things help. Please call your representatives. I mean, help us. I just think for right now, you get a lot of, I am very lucky. I have some incredibly wonderful men in my life. And I love my son, to the ends of this earth and beyond. He's such a good, wonderful human being. He respects me, his sister, his girlfriend. He's a wonderful kid. I just would like to see more men be louder about these things. Like the good guys, please step it up. Please help us more. Please. Yeah, I'm not asking to be saved, okay? It's not that. I'm asking you to join the fight here with us louder. Like, get into it, please. I just wanted to make sure there's nothing else that I've forgotten that I wanted to talk about. Oh, yeah, there was this thing that I wrote about. And it's the last thing I'll talk about. In 2012, my yoga studio was open in downtown Santa Monica, on 2nd Street, around the corner from the 3rd Street Promenade, right around the corner between Wilshire and Arizona, for those of you familiar with Santa Monica. And I got a call one morning. It was like 6 o'clock in the morning. And I was up with my kids. I was making pancakes. And it was the young woman who opens the yoga studio. She opened the yoga studio at the time, and I thought she was a friend. She turned out not to be a friend. But anyway, she called, and so I answered the phone, and I put her on speaker because I was flipping pancakes, and it was so early. I was like, is everything okay? And she said no. She's like, there is a mountain lion in the courtyard, and there are police here, and Fish and Game is on the way. And I'm like, a mountain lion in the courtyard? Like, are you serious right now? And she was serious. And there was a mountain lion there. And, for those, in case you haven't been to Santa Monica, it's almost like saying there's like a mountain lion walking around Times Square. Like, it just doesn't make sense. It's a highly populated area. There are businesses, there are restaurants. There's like, not maybe 6 o'clock in the morning. It's not like bustling, but it's just not a place where you would ever, ever, ever see a mountain lion. So it was just bizarre. So they weren't letting anybody into or out of the area. And after a while, somebody from the police department called, the fire department was there, Fish and Game was, they called me as Fish and Game was arriving and basically said they were going to, they had closed the gates of the courtyard, and they had created a perimeter on 2nd Street, and they were going to shoot the mountain lion with a tranquilizer dart, and hope to knock it out that way. And I do remember thinking like, couldn't they just throw in like a steak with like sleeping pills, mashed into it? But I figured that just I've probably seen that in too many movies or something, and that surely they know what they're doing. Well, they shot this mountain lion with the tranquilizer darts, and it made a run for the gate because it hurts. And it's scared and it's trapped, right? And now it's being shot at. So of course it like runs for the gates, which is where the people are, and they shot it with bullets and killed it. And it was just devastating. It was devastating, and I know that a lot of the people there were devastated. Like Fish and Game had been tracking mountain lions in the area for 10 years. There are mountain lions in the Santa Monica Mountains. There's like a 275 mile, like just a square mile area of where these mountain lions are, like this range, right? And it's pinned in by the freeway, the ocean, and like agricultural land. And it's really not enough space for more than like 10 or 15 mountain lions. And so what would happen is, and they were explaining this to me after, what would happen is like when the males would reach adult age, they would often be challenged by the other like adult male. And a lot of the time they would make a run for it. And sometimes they would get hit by a car on the freeway and die, or, like this one ended up coming down out of the mountains and into the promenade. And it's because there's not enough space. There's not enough food. There aren't enough, and that's because of us. And I was trying to figure out, like, why is this on my mind right now? Because this happened in 2012. And I, sometimes when I'm like writing the essays of the week, something will pop into my head. And I think like, why is that suddenly on my mind in relation to this, And I think that it's that whole idea of a lack of accountability. It's like he didn't do anything wrong, this mountain lion, right? There's not enough space or food or resources. So he's desperate, right? He comes out of the mountains and down and finds himself, I'm sure he was terrified, right? He finds himself in the promenade. He goes into a courtyard. I mean, it broke my heart, and it was like hard to feel like it was totally coincidental. Like, it's like they're running on instinct. And I thought like maybe the courtyard felt safe to him, and yeah, I don't know. And just, like they end up killing him. And it feels a lot like these men, these men in the files. It's like, they're just going to take what they want. And if anyone is too much trouble, they'll just kill them. They'll disappear them. They'll make it go away. Or they'll dump so many files at once that nobody gets any justice. It's just, all the victims' names get released and none of the men, or only a few of the men. It's just really, it just really made me feel so enraged and heartbroken. But I'm going to tell you that I've gotten to the point now where I honestly think between all this stuff that's going on, and that just unbelievably racist video the president posted of the Obamas, and I'm not even going to with this Lion King BS. I'm just not even doing that. This is just intentional. It's this intentional, racist, horrifying thing meant to distract, like get everybody off of the Epstein file thing, but also be vile while you're doing it. And I just think it's cracking. Like the foundation is cracking. It's so ugly and dark that if you're still with these people, if you're still in support of this, there's nothing. You have to just then say, I'm in support of racism. Like that's where I'm at. Because that's who they're forcing that on you now. Like that's what you have to embrace in order to keep supporting this. It's not, credible, plausible. He knew what he was posting. And there's no apology given after. There's no, they just keep doing this stuff. And, if you're going to just continue to support it, then that's what you're supporting. And that's who you've decided to be. And you got to own that then, and I think it's very sad. I do. I think it's very sad. And I hope that there will be more and more people saying that's not who I'm going to be. I don't want to be that person. That's not, I didn't sign up for this. This is not what I want. But none of us can make those decisions for anyone else. People have to choose what they're going to do, what they're going to get behind, who they're going to be in this moment. And you really only get to, you got to choose. Like this is the time, and yeah, this is it. So for anyone who is having a tough time because of the files, or just it's just very painful for people who've been assaulted to. And I didn't even say, but when I was 16, I had another, like a friend of the family assaulted me, and I thought I was safe because it was a friend, I thought. And it's a very painful thing when you grow up in a culture and you are taught that if something like that happens, it's your fault. And when I was, I beat myself up. I was like, well, I drank too much. I should have known better. I told my best friend, I didn't tell anyone else. I told my best friend the night that it happened. She said, you were probably flirting. I blamed myself for a long time until I didn't tell anyone for, except for my best friend. And when that was the response, then I didn't tell anyone for quite a while. I did go to the doctor, thankfully, but it's a very painful thing to go through something like that and be in a culture that teaches you to blame yourself. There's a grown man who intentionally plied me with alcohol. And when I explained I had never been with anyone and I wanted to go home and I was sorry and all that, none of it mattered. That's not my fault. That's not my fault. I didn't deserve what happened. But the culture doesn't support girls and women and children. It doesn't. And neither does the legal system. And it doesn't support brown people and black people and queer people. And you gotta recognize what's happening here and care. Or you don't. Or you don't care. And then you decide that that's who you're going to be. But I really hope you don't decide that. Because we need people to care, and to really care, not just to give words to it, but to take some action, make some phone calls and boycott some places and just like try to really get in the game here. Try to get in the fight. Help. Okay. I love you. I appreciate those of you so much who are like, having a hard time right now. It is really tough. You're not alone. You know where to find me if you need help and or support. And I'm sending you hugs and love until next time. Be good to yourself. Okay. Be gentle with yourself.